good evening, and you're tuned into a segment of Woman to Woman. I'm Roxy Williams. I'm your host on this evening, and I want you right now to go get a pen, call a friend, but I want you to stay tuned in. We have an incredible man that I want you to meet tonight by the name of Mr. Don Samuelson. Write it down. This evening, I'd like to introduce you to my co-host. To my right, I'm sorry.
It's been a long evening. Listen, my name is Margot Richmond, and welcome this evening.
And to my left.
My name is Elizabeth Johnson, and good evening.
And my name is Lionel Nixon. Good evening.
Thank you all for being with me on this evening of Woman to Woman, and we have our guest, Mr. Don Samuelson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good. I want you all to understand that someone has thought about our seniors in a different way, and I want Donald Samuelson to talk about some of the incredible programs that he has put in place for our seniors who are now being introduced to the internet. Can you talk a little bit about what you've accomplished?
Well, at the individual level, we've been helpful in taking every individual senior that we see and developing a value proposition for that senior as to why it's relevant to being on the internet.
Correct.
That's at the, and to do that effectively, you would have to do it with 40 million seniors.
Wow.
That takes a long time.
Yes.
I talk fast, but I don't think I get through 40 million seniors very quickly. So then we started developing computer learning centers in senior housing developments. And that was done with developments that I managed or owned for the Chicago Housing Authority. Mm-hmm. And there you would take an entire building and say, let's see what we can do to promote the idea of the internet having benefits to them individually. And they would go through a learning series, and then they would learn how to use the internet, and then ideally they would be able to do it for themselves.
Let me ask you this, were there any age limitations, or were you able to engage every senior that was interested?
Yeah, there was, the buildings generally are limited to people who are 62 or 65 and older.
Okay.
That's the definitions of seniorness in the world of HUD.
Okay.
So I know that being a senior is a state of mind, and some seniors are in high school and some are seniors in college, but that's not the seniors we're talking about. We're talking about people who are getting a little older.
Okay.
In their.
Okay.
Anyhow, you take from the individual experience to the building experience. Then in 2010, I ratcheted it up and said, let's take a region of Illinois, mm-hmm. Northern Illinois, and let's do it in 23 buildings. 23 buildings, same thing.
Wow.
And you're able to see that the process, the same process will work in the same way, but you now need to start using more online instruction, mm-hmm. or instructional videos.
Is that your formula for success?
Well,
it
will be individual connection to begin with.
Okay.
You have to get you can't necessarily get the computer or a video to get them promoting to start.
Correct.
But I think your children could get you to start, your grandchildren could get you to start, your neighbors could get you to start, but then you have to say, okay, now that I'm ready to start, what do I do?
Yeah.
And now it's a matter of, okay, how do we go through, this is sort of a matter of instructional design.
Correct.
To put together something that will enable people to separate the wheat from the chaff. What do I really need to know to be online and to use the internet effectively?
Absolutely.
So it'll make a difference in my life.
Sure.
So that was the regional program. That was funded by BTAP. Now the next part of this, which we...
Well, Could you explain what BTAP?
Well, BTAP is one of the Obama stimulus programs called the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program.
Okay, and say it again for some of my listening audience. It's the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program. And so you were able to not only get the program, but implement it in the 23 buildings.
In Northern Illinois, and that was in Rock Island and Moline and Rockford and DeKalb.
You are incredible.
And Henry County and Grundy County and Joliet and Kankakee and parts of Chicago.
Oh, you make so light of that. That is big news.
Well,
and that's quite a distance. That's, I mean, you know, you cover quite a bit of territory.
It takes 3 hours to get to.
Yep, right.
I know that Moline and Rock Island. And then DeKalb was a lot closer than I thought it was. I learned that in the process.
Oh, he's learning geography as he goes.
But you know, one of the things that he mentioned that a part of the stimulus package, he was able to develop this through that stimulus package.
Yeah, it's not, and it's the thought is that this was not simply to help 3,000 residents in 23 buildings.
Okay.
learn how to use a computer.
Okay.
The idea is that each one of the buildings would be a hub for a neighborhood,
Okay.
community-based
Oh wow.
senior internet training program.
Oh
Okay,
wow.
great.
That is
Okay.
that is the connection
Yes.
back to the greater
Now
community.
now you can begin to
Oh,
see
wow.
a community saying, not only are we interested in our local high school football team, or we're interested in our local chamber of commerce,
But-
we're interested in growing and building and making our seniors all that they can be.
Absolutely.
Now, how does that work? Well, the libraries around the country, probably 70% of the library patrons are seniors
Yes.
They are.
wanting to learn how to use a computer.
Correct.
Yes.
Librarians don't have the time or haven't been trained to, in
Teach
fact,
it.
instruct that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that happens is that 15% of the people who have gone through this training program that we found feel that they are comfortable in training other people.
Okay.
Well, they
So
can go
it's trainers,
Training,
trainers, training, trainers.
and then to go to the
Trainers for
outpost
trainers.
and work in the library and assist the librarian.
Oh wow.
Then we have, the next thing is, what about providing assistance in the senior centers where
Correct.
they don't have computers?
Okay.
And they have, part of the Aging for America grant, I guess you don't have funding for that, but you have the ability of using the seniors who have been trained in the housing developments.
Correct.
The next thing is, what about the high school? What do they do? Well, high school kids can become volunteer tutors.
Correct.
More important, they can recruit contributions of computers, refurbish the computers, and send them back into the qualified individuals who are low income, either in families or seniors.
Right. But even there, I mean, let's go back to the tutoring phase. I like it. I like it a lot because it allows a younger person, finally, to be able to teach an older person something that they did not know prior to that kid coming in. And you know how the Bible says, and then the children will lead. It
Yeah.
is a point of leading
Yeah.
us back to each other as well, that we can now form a communication because we have something in common.
Yeah.
I have something now that you need to know. Usually it's reversed for our young people.
And it's pretty
They're
good.
waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
mean,
it's also
such
an
a-
exciting thing because the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, you know, they were trained, like, because I used to be a Girl Scout. They were trained. They were
Ooh.
trained in Brownies. They were trained to be able to help our seniors, to be able to go
Right.
back and do some things.
It was a goal.
I think that now is a great time for this to take place.
Yes.
One of the
And what a great model
right.
for it to take
Well,
place
one
with.
thing also, in one of the buildings we did in Chicago called Lincoln Perry, and Lincoln Perry
I know that.
is Step and Fetchit, and that's the 33rd in Indiana. And
know
that's
that.
a building that consists of about 400 units, all African Americans, all seniors.
Okay.
And when we did this program for them in 2000, the average senior there was 75 years of age.
Wow.
And then their parents, that means they were born in 1925. Their parents were born in 1900.
Mm-hmm.
Their grandparents were born in 1875. We then introduced something called My Life, which is a series of prompting questions to ask people to fill out forms about what their grandparents did, what they looked like, what they da-da-da-da. Well, that building represented a oral history of post-Reconstruction slavery experiences.
Oh
Wow.
my.
So I learned there by just listening to them tell their stories
Yes.
the distinctions between, in the slave community, between being a field slave and being a cook slave or a cooking house slave, to being a
Wow.
house slave, to being a slave that was responsible for the raising of the children, like in Help. It was a Help the movie.
Right. I saw that.
So
It was
all of those things were just common knowledge to people. Now, if the people who would be helping seniors to write their retrospectives or their
Correct.
autobiography, their My
Correct.
Life, would now learn something about an experience that they had no knowledge of.
Right, and herein is, you know, I have an 18-year-old that we used to challenge him in Black History Month, and, you know, we talk about the leaders that you know, but to have this experience where you can go into a building and in this kind of interaction have history that aren't written in books, and you are part of his story. You're able to help write maybe Mr. Samuelson's story because it's one that's not told. It's not like they're sitting on a computer typing their biography waiting for it to be edited and printed. And now you have a young person that might find interest in that, and the two again can work together. I just see the two
Well,
generations
there's one thing here that's
coming back.
interesting. We have a woman, I think is sitting over here, named Kathy Raby. And Kathy Raby's
Hi, Kathy.
father was Al Raby. Now, if there could be a student, junior, senior at DuSable High School who would go to talk to Kathy about constructing her My Life
Yes.
with the discussion of Al Raby
Yes.
from her perspective. But
Yes.
she doesn't know everything about Al Raby, but
Yes.
she has a lot of other people who know things about him.
Absolutely.
You could put together the Al Raby story in a much more convincing, nuanced, careful way. Al Raby was never a particular propagandist or self-promoter, as I see it, but he was also the director of the Peace Corps in Ghana for a period of time.
Right.
So that is a sort of a person that I think would be interesting to know of, and it would be interesting also to know how much time he had for his family given all his other activities.
Correct.
I have two questions for you. I can tell you with certainty that President Obama is interested in people in the United States in particular getting connected on the internet. And so my first question is, Don, what's next? What are you planning on doing next? I have observed you and worked with you over a long period of time. And your ability to be innovative and go where others have not gone, it continues to amaze me. So my two questions are this. If President Obama was sitting here right now, what advice would you give him relative to getting seniors online, getting people? What direction do you think that the government should take along those lines? That's the first question.
Okay. Let him answer that.
Yeah.
That's a question that I think has a fairly easy answer to as to what I would advise him, because we don't know as well yet as we should know what really is necessary to get a senior online. And do you need to have both a motivation and a training and a computer and a connectivity? Or do you just need a low-cost connectivity? We're not sure of that yet. But the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, is going to announce in a couple weeks that they're going to have an RFP for pilot projects for disadvantaged populations. You have to work through the Lifeline program, which is a universal service fund. But I've currently been talking to AT&T about developing a demonstration project here in Chicago, maybe in Danny Davis's district.
Well, let's cross our fingers.
Or perhaps in Northwest Illinois with Frontier or CenturyLink. But I think that if we really do that properly and spend some time and money to make sure we know how people are starting, we know where they are to begin with, and where we want them to end up, which is simply to be capable of being online. And then the next thing is, how do you get them from where they are to where you would like them to be as cost effectively as possible? Now, one of the things that I think is going to happen is that there's a lot of discussion, I think maybe near action, on the conversion of the Universal Service Fund, which provides a lifeline subsidy for your landline in your home.
Oh, wow.
So your
Not
landline,
many people keep
if you,
landlines these days.
that's the problem. You're subsidizing something that doesn't exist.
Right.
So the thought would be, well, why don't you take the subsidy and make it available for a broadband connection?
Correct. That would make the greatest sense.
Because if you have broadband and you use Skype, you automatically pick up your telephone for free.
Absolutely.
And you pick up a fair amount of video and movies for free.
Correct.
Over the internet.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're using the $10 connection, the subsidy in Lifeline, to, I think for all practical purposes, that would enable anyone living in Section 8 housing or public housing in the United States to take advantage of that program to provide connectivity that would enable them to have the connectivity for free. Is that going to be sufficient? Will the free connectivity be all that you need?
No.
No. But then what do we need in addition to that, and how is that going to be provided? Now, refurbished computers are one thing. More use of training that doesn't rely upon me telling my story to this individual person 40 million times.
Correct.
As good as that might be, but maybe somebody would say, well, Don, why don't you actually do 20 of these things and let people see them?
Correct.
Put them on a video.
And you know, I think the more creative and the more innovative we are with technology, it sparks a little life in our older generation, because they begin to see themselves reproduced in a different way than they have come to know.
Kathy Raby shared with us before the show started that You know how seniors are separated from their families. They may have family members in Florida, or they may have their
Yes.
children,
And how
grandchildren
Skype
away
helps.
away in college, and it gets them to the point where they're meeting new friends and they're connecting. So this loneliness that they're experiencing, because they haven't seen their grandchild in 5 years or 10 years, they can actually now. I think that would be one of the motivating
I would have to put
factors.
some procedures in place because
Yeah.
I would not want my mother on that date.com.
Are you kidding me?
But you know what?
She could only Skype the grandkids.
When you're talking about Skyping, they actually, I saw where the grandmother actually saw her grandchildren being born physically
Yes,
in real
correct.
time.
Yes.
And it
She
keeps,
might
and
not
those
have been
are
in
things
that
are
right.
important.
She
to our
actually
older
saw that
people, and
child
staying
the minute that
connected in
child came
family.
into the world too. So
So many of them, I was asking in some of the surveys, what is your circle of friends right now? Who do you talk to?
Right.
What do you talk about?
Right.
How often do you talk? And communicate, and how do you, what is the mechanism for communication? Most people were relying on phone calls or periodic Christmas visits, holiday
Sure.
visits.
Sure.
They were very infrequent.
Sure.
But now if you're online with email and Skype, you can be talking to much larger audiences.
Correct.
You can send an email to not just your granddaughter, but all of your granddaughters.
all your relatives at the same
Sure.
time.
And I think what we're doing here, and you know, if you're just tuned in, we're talking to Don Samuelson, and it is incredible to see a visionary of our time, because this is a discussion that I think you can use in your own family. It is so important to our elders to stay connected.
Now, this is something that churches can do. I was thinking of being a minister at one time in my life. And
Well, I am one. Think again.
I think a lot of, I think a lot of
Another
the sermons-
question is
That's
the
the
thousands,
thing.
the thousands of
Let me finish.
people that are watching are the senior citizens, if they're interested, since
Absolutely.
we're running out of time, how do they engage? How do they get involved? I understand you have a website.
Yeah, the website is getseniorsonline.org, www.getseniorsonline.org.
Okay.
And that will be sort of a summary of all the stuff that I've been doing for the last year. We're going to kind of do a facelift for Get Seniors Online in June when we connect to one of these national organizations in the pilot project, but it'll be much more oriented not so much to how did the BTOP program do and but much more in how are seniors using it, what's happened with the 23 buildings, why don't people want to use the internet, what are interesting things that people are doing on the internet.
Getting data back.
Yeah, and use this as a vehicle for getting the word out as broadly as possible on the practical ways in which people are currently using the internet.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the churches, because I think that's one of the areas that it can really sweep the country quickly.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you a question for the future. Do you all imagine that voting online will ever come into play?
Yes, I
Has
do.
there been some
I do.
discussions on that?
Well, they're actually in the process of introducing computers to seniors, and with the touch, because I'm a judge, and
The touch screen.
the touch screen, and if you voted early, that's the only way that you can vote is through the touch. So they're trying to get seniors acclimated to that.
Right.
So yeah, at some point,
Because we may be able to
everything's
get
gonna
more
be
seniors out
computerized.
that are not able to really, if the weather is bad for them to come
Right.
out during that period of time, it's just, they'll stay at home. It's
And
too
the same
cold.
thing about
I'm
churches.
glad that we have a discussion that's bringing us back to the needs of a very invisible, very vulnerable population.
You know, one thing about just going to voting again, I've always wondered when I vote, who are these people? I don't know who they are.
Right.
Especially judges.
Judges.
Yeah.
I would like to say, I got 3 votes here. I'd like to see them a little bio, and I go for
Absolutely.
Mr. X.
Right.
I read Mr. X, I read Mr. Y, I
Yes.
read Miss C.
Absolutely.
Then I have a better sense of who they are and why I might
Yes.
vote for them.
Right.
I
And
agree.
a lot of times, even if they've heard the names, you have given them a vehicle to go online.
Yeah, you've heard the name, but you don't know if it's a good name or a bad name. You
know
just heard the
nothing
name.
But if
about
they
them.
hear the name prior to voting, they can access the
Yes.
internet
Yes.
because of
Yeah,
you
yeah.
and figure out who Don Samuelson
Yeah,
really
yeah,
is.
yeah.
I love it. I love the whole concept, and I think you've come up with a formula that will be able to be reproduced all over the nation.
Well, that goes back to Lionel's question about if President Obama were here, what we would do. And I think that I think they've got all the things in place to do that. And it's just a matter, not just a matter. It's a matter of what the priorities happen to be. So
That's it.
that he has only so much bandwidth of time to devote to things.
Correct.
And he has, 15 agencies, he's got 3 wars, he's got a bunch of other things. It's hard to figure out how you prioritize.
Well, I know there's a lot of interest, Don, in what you're doing and what we're doing here in Chicago.
Well, as we know, with Woman to Woman, we always have more discussion than we have enough time. So I just want you all to stay tuned in, and we'll be right back.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Renee Prejean-Matanki, here again with Don Samuelson to wrap this up.
It's made up of these elements. It's the value of human capital development. And if you take a senior who is 68 years of age, who has stopped working and is not self-sufficient, that person's going to consume a lot of government and societal resources to keep them occupied. On the other hand, if you can say to that 60-year-old person, what have you done with your life? What have you learned? Where have you worked? What are your children like? How can we get you re-engaged in your old activities, building upon those activities? Now, that's where you really begin to see some dividends, because seniors can, in the building we're in right now, we have seniors who are raising grandchildren. The seniors who are using the computers to raise grandchildren are using the computers for encyclopedia purposes, for supplemental education, and the performance of their grandchild is significantly increasing in school because of the intervention of an online senior. Now, if you take grandparents and children and see how many there are in the United States, that's a large number of people for which grandparents can become assistant teachers. And the potential value of them continuing to work, continuing to use government services efficiently, not using government services where you don't need. Economists talk about this as the internalization of externalities, rather, which is to take all of the benefits that derive from an action, not limited to the immediate benefits, but the spillover benefits. One of the benefits of this would be by a grandparent working with a grandchild in developing their studies could decide to take My Life, an autobiography booklet which Carol McConnell has written, go through that to translate the experiences of the grandparent to the grandchild. What was the grandparents' parents and grandparents like? So you're really beginning to develop a history of that individual, which for an average senior right now, who might be 75, they were born in 1930, 35, their parents were born in 1920, their grandparents were born in 1880 or so. You're now getting the ability in this building to take, by working through that My Life, 5 generations of a family. And all the family members have the ability of having a better understanding of who one another are. That can create a social network among families, and they can provide information among family members that they wouldn't otherwise have known.
And the added value of having a family history
Yes.
that you can pass on.
And you could then look at other family histories. And so you develop in this building, there could be, I would hope that there could be people who could look at their published histories and see person A could see what person B's family life has been all about, and it's a learning experience.
Right. So there's that intergenerational component. I want to refocus you just a little bit, though, and go back to the value of an online senior, not just to the senior, but, well, yeah, to the senior, the value to the senior. Let's talk about the economics of that.
Well, I did some interviews with some community program managers about a year ago, and I asked them the question as to what would the value be, precisely what you said. And I said, I know it's sort of difficult to do, but is the value of an online senior $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000? And the answers I got back were surprising, but pretty obvious when you think about them. And the answer was the value, overall value to the senior in society is priceless. Because the question becomes, what is the value of taking a person who is opted out of life or in the process of opting out of life and re-engaging?
Yes.
And that has all the potential benefits that we're talking about. So I would guess it wouldn't be very difficult to assume that the value of getting a senior online and keeping them online and instructing them how to stay online and motivating them to use new applications online could be very easily worth $100,000. Now the cost of this demonstration program, I was just talking to the people from Connected Living today, the cost of the program was about $2,000 per person. Well, but that's the cost. What are the benefits? If the benefits are $100,000 or $10,000 and the cost are $2,000, that's an investment that's well worth making.
Yes. Thank you so much. Are there any other things that you'd like to add just to wrap this up? We're nearing the end of our time now and the end of this segment. What do you think is probably the most important point that you would make if you were addressing a senior and trying to convince them of the value of
Well,
learning the
I think the
internet?
value proposition has to be made on an individual basis. So in the olden days, when I was actually interviewing seniors myself, this would be the first computer lesson. It would be you and I sitting at a table with water talking. And I would be going through your background. Who are you? Where have you come from? How long have you lived here? What about your family? What about your work? What about your education? What are your interests? What do you read? What do you do? What do you watch on TV? What movies do you like? And I would be writing them down on an easel. And at the end of an hour, I would ask whether or not there's anything else you want to add to your easel. And you would say yes or no. And I'd say, well, that's the end of our first computer lesson. And you sort of wonder about that. And then I say, we're going to meet next week, same time, same place. Lesson 2. You go off doing what you do. I go off and Google all of your interests and develop a 3-ring binder, which I will then assemble to you. And when we have our second lesson, I will give you the binder and say, this is your second computer lesson. And that computer lesson is really a matter of me going through the binder with you to see if I've captured things that are interesting you.
Right.
And usually at the end of that second session, I'll say, well, now we're done with our second computer lesson. And the person says, okay, I got to ask you this question. When do I actually see a computer? And I say, the next session you learn to use a computer. Because now you know what you want to do with the computer. You want to find out ways that you can do what I did.
That's
and
perfect.
other things. And that's why there's 40 million seniors who all have different interests. And you can't have a single, we can teach a single process of learning how to use email and search and turn on computers. But the individual applications and uses you make will be highly individual.
Thank you. Thank you. You've been watching Omnibus Roundtable. We're wrapping up this very interesting discussion with Don Samuelson and your host, Renee Frazion-Matenki. Have a great evening.
Hi, I'm Wanda Carter.
And I'm Naima Latif.
And we'd like to talk to you, woman to woman. Join us on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. and Wednesdays at 10:30 a.m. on ECTV, Channel 6 in Evanston, Illinois.
Or join us worldwide at www.ectv.com.